And then Matt from Al Nickerson, June 18th, 2024 letter. Please add to please hold January 2025. I'm going to try to answer it. And I got to say, I had a little pile of paper at the top of the stairs here for the longest time, where I would walk past it and go, why is there a little pile of paper here? I don't want this little pile of paper here. It should be filed somewhere. And it's like, oh, it's got Al Nickerson's letter, and I want to answer it. But I don't know how I want to answer it, or at what length I want to answer it, or where I'm going to answer it. But it's in the pile of please hold. So that's the dilemma that I came to. Is this please hold for Dave Sim? Is this just a letter that I'm going to send to Al Nickerson? Is this hey Matt, can you run Al Nickerson's letter on AMOC? And I'll answer it there. And finally decided, no, I'm going to give a try at this where angels fear to tread. This is an excerpt from Al Nickerson's letter. Thanks for everything, Dave. I learned what I know about self-publishing from you. I still have and read my beat-up copy of the Cerebus Guide to Self-Publishing. I learned what I know about creators' rights from you, Steve Bissett, Scott McCloud, what Neal Adams would say about the topic, as well as learning the horrors of how Jack Kirby, Jerry Siegel, Joe Shuster, Bill Finger, Jerry Robinson, Wally Wood, and Steve Ditko were treated. On a related note, each year while at the New York Comic Con, I would stop by Neal Adams' booth to shake his hand and thank him for all that he had done for creators' rights. The last time I spoke with Neal, you've got in parentheses 2019 with a question mark, he had told me that he did so because of, quote, selfish reasons, unquote. I had asked Neal, how was it selfish in helping Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster in the late 1970s during the production of Superman the movie? Neal didn't have an answer. So trying to guarantee that I don't run all over the place on this, this definitely ties in with the Paul Levitz letter. So I think maybe that was something where when I saw that, I went, okay, yeah, time to do this to the best of my ability. Actually, I decided that before I read the Paul Levitz letter, and then went, wow, these two things fit together pretty good. In my humble opinion, there is no such thing as a, quote, till death us do part, unquote, marriage between a corporation and a creator, which I think is the way Neal saw it, that a corporation like DC is and could be made to see how beholden it was and is, if not to all creators, at least to creators like Siegel and Shuster. That Siegel and Shuster were married to DC, and DC was married to Siegel and Shuster. That worked to a degree with Paul Levitz, who came out of comics fandom. Paul could see what Neal saw, but Paul always needed to translate his decision-making into something comics agnostic and comics ignorant Time Warner executives saw and could understand, which I infer had been, quote, bad publicity will hurt the movie, unquote. That's all that would have mattered to the executives. Siegel and Shuster has been paid off a couple of times over the years. High-end lump sum go-away payments. And I mean high-end in, like us conventional human beings, high-end. Not, DC suddenly cut them a check for a couple of $1 million. It was, okay, this has all been settled, but just to get you guys to shut up and go away, here's another whatever it was. And those payments were gone before they knew it. DC bought Superman and made Superman into the success that he was and is. It's the corporate view of creativity. The analogy is Weishaupt's quote, which I was thinking of in those frames of reference in Cerebus. I bought it, my magic. Neal's championing of Siegel and Schuster was selfish, I think, in the sense that Neal thought he was laying the groundwork for similar treatment in his own dotage. Quote, if I can get them to treat Jerry and Joe properly by the time I'm their age, they'll treat me properly, unquote. The fact that DC was basically doing best-selling Neal Adams collections, but pretending they were just Batman collections, as an example. Paul did see that eventually. Neal made Paul see that, made Paul go to bat for him with the Time Warner execs. But what that got Neal was temporary DC corporate leverage. All corporate leverage is temporary, based on the financial bottom line. Neal got creative autonomy and an unprecedented financial deal for Batman Odyssey. The book tanked insofar as it wasn't the next Dark Knight Returns. I'm guessing that was part of what cost Paul his job. He went too far out on Neal Adams' limb and lost his own corporate credibility. He did what you and I would see as the right thing, erring on the creator side, rewarding retroactively a transformational creator. And Neal was a transformational creator for DC. And thus, Paul just became a money loser enabler. I'm looking at the numbers the execs were saying, and I'm not getting why we bent over backward for this guy. Tell me, Paul, why did we bend over backward for this guy? Related to that, by the time he died, Jack Kirby was unemployable because his work didn't sell anymore at the level that it did once, both in comics and animation. Fandom prevailed insofar as heritage auctions exist now. How much of your early and or most desirable artwork do you still own? How fast do you have to sell it to keep a roof over your head and food on the table? Neal and Jack both lived long enough to see their peak work sell for tens of thousands of dollars. It's a double-edged, bittersweet sword. Most of that work they sold for hundreds of dollars. Wally Wood, as an example, never lived to see those big original art paydays. Count your blessings. A core point is that DC, and whoever is running DC, owns, free and clear, 90% of Neal's peak creativity, 1968 to 1974. If Neal had lived to be 100 like Jimmy Carter, DC would never have perceived itself as being beholden to him. Anything of his that they wanted and want to use in a Batman movie, they use it because they own it. End of story. End of obligation. If someone makes a Man-Bat movie that makes $20 billion, Neal and his heirs make nothing.
Part of what Paul Levitz did do is that sort of changed a little bit. The contracts in, I think, the 90s. I think it's the 90s is when I know it was big time. If you introduced a character that became part of the mythos, you got a cut of any adaptation. Like Chuck Dixon gets a cut of when they use Bane.
Right.
And that's, it's a win for creators' rights, except that, they're giving you a slightly bigger bag of chicken feed than they normally did.
And I'm not sure that that's still true. That ties in with another thing where you can sign the agreement with Paul Levitz, who understands your viewpoint and is close enough to your viewpoint to say, okay, I don't know how I'm going to explain this to the Time Warner executives, but I'll try and figure out a way. Once Paul Levitz was gone, and once DC started changing hands, and it was now all just the executives and editorial, you do what we tell you to do. Don't cause us grief. We're dealing with multi-million-dollar movies. You are nickel and dime guys. Don't get in our face about anything. And I think we can infer that a lot of those agreements, a lot of the innovation that Paul Levitz and Jeanette Kahn and Dick Giordano brought in and rode roughshod on and sold to the DC executives, once they were gone and their successors were gone and the other successors were gone, and it's just, AT&T or whoever it is now, that, okay, we're way up here, you're way down there. I think we can read from Bill Willingham's experience with Fables that, I don't know, did this happen to Neil Gaiman with Sandman, where DC just went, the new DC, the completely corporate DC went, why are we dealing with this? Why are we even paying this guy? What's he going to do? Sue us? The guy has, as my father used to say, doesn't have a pot to piss in and a window to throw it out of. Relatively speaking, if you're talking about a top level, Fortune 500 executive at AT&T, and I think there's a lot of guys that have deals or thought they had deals and are too embarrassed to say, no, DC is not living up to their agreement on anything, and I'm getting so little of what it is that I'm contractually obligated to get, and I can't afford to hire lawyers to enforce it. So I can't afford to, be a squeaky wheel here. And Bill Willingham did what he thought was the only thing that he could do, was to go, I'm creator. I'm the creator. Fables is supposed to be creative owned. I'm putting it into the public domain. And immediately DC went, no, you're not. In your dreams, you're putting Fables into public domain. We'll let you know what happens with Fables, and we'll let you know when you get paid and how much you get paid, and you'll just have to bite down on that, sucker.